You're watching Arise, the world's standout news channel. Arise News, awards, and beyond.
Dr. George Olombi, Executive Vice President of Afreximbank. Dr. Chipal Ayi Kabata, Senior Technical Advisor to the President, Arab Bank for Economic Development in Africa. Mr. Cherno Habib Han, CFA, Managing Director, CEO, Shelter Afrique. Mr. Usman Fool, Director of the African Development Bank, Industrial Trade Development. Ms. Marlene Ngoyi, CEO of the Fund for Export Development Bank, Africa. She will be joining us, so you might see her popping up onto the stage soon. Mr. Mohand Borai, Director General, Bank of Agriculture and Development Rural.
Okay, great. It's fantastic to have you all on stage. Don't worry, you can have that seat, George. That's fine. It's fantastic to have you all on stage. Now, the title of this session, Strengthening Africa's Multilateral Finance Institutions for Delivering Agenda 2063, is, of course, crucial. Now, the continent itself is on a journey to deliver Agenda 2063, and it's an ambitious task, but it's also filled with its own challenges. The continent faces a trade financing gap of 130 billion US dollars each year, while attracting only 3% of global FDI. So Africa's multilateral financial institutions, or MFIs, are central to closing that gap, building the scale, the innovation, and the resources that we need. So today I've got these panelists who are helping to drive those institutions to unlock that capital, the confidence, and the collaboration that is needed. Now, I'm going to start off by asking you all the same question, and I only want a sentence from you all. And the question is, what is the number one priority African MFIs must deliver in the next 5 years to keep Agenda 2063 alive? Mr. Fu, I'm going to start with you.
Good morning, everyone. Before answering your question, actually, I would like to extend my heartfelt gratitude to the Afreximbank for inviting us, the African Development Bank, and commend them really for an extraordinary Iatf this year. This is a strong pull and really well done for the Afrexim. So to address your question, for me, it's key really to mobilize capital at scale, but also on both on the buy side and the sell side, which means mobilize capital, but also have a pipeline of bankable projects, helping our African governments, helping the private sector into having solid, commercially viable transactions to absorb that capital.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chino, I'm going to come next to you to answer the same question.
Hello? Okay. I'm audible, yes? Okay, thank you. Again, as my good brother here mentioned, this is really an opportunity to really thank Afreximbank and the Iatf Advisory Board, chaired by President Obasanjo, and many others that have been tremendous and very impactful. This is a major initiative, and we are very happy to be part of the Alliance of African Multilateral Financial Institutions. which were co-founded by Afreximbank, Shelter Afrique, and ZEPRI, and many other institutions. And Badea also is a great partner to that alliance. So to answer your question in one sentence, I would say that we are far from that target, first of all, right? So the Agenda 2063 assumed an annual growth rate of 7% of the GDPs in Africa. Today, we are experiencing an average growth rate of 3% per annum. So we are very far from the target of 7% per annum, which was set since 2013. So over 50 years to 2063, the assumption was 7% per year. So with the gap of 4% on a yearly basis, from now on we need to achieve at least 10% annually if we were to achieve the target of 2063. So the challenge is humongous. We're asking our countries to go from 3 to 10% annually. So to address that, we need to be more catalytic. We have to be much faster, more impactful, and scale up what we're trying to do. So this is why we have set up this Alliance of African Multilateral Financial Institutions with a platform to really collaborate and scale up our interventions, leveraging our public source of funding, because we are multilateral financial institutions, but also going into the private markets, capital markets, and global markets to accelerate the growth.
Thank you very much. Can I just remind you just one sentence, just to start off? But that was, of course, we're going to get into more of that. Thank you very much, Mr. Han. I'm going to go next to you, Mr. Kabata.
Thank you very much. Standing on a protocol reiterates our appreciation to Afrexim for this tremendous event. Going straight to your question, what is the number one priority for multilateral financial institution to deliver on Agenda 2063? What all does beyond Agenda 2063 is actually infrastructure. So infrastructure, more specifically on energy and transport, remains the top priority where multilateral financial institutions should work hard to mobilize more capital to de-risk those infrastructure projects so that the private sector can come in and deliver on that gap on infrastructure. That's the number one top priority from a Badea perspective. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Kamanga.
So good morning. I will also want to join my colleague in thanking Afreximbank for inviting us to this occasion and continuing to create the forums like this so that we can address our challenges in our continent. So I'm different from the majority of the people in this panel. I come from the insurance industry. ZEPRI is a commercial institution, is a reinsurance company. And so for us, what we see, and in this amphi, we have ATD, we have Africa Re, and similar other insurance institutions. And our priority is really to close the protection gap, is to see ability of our governments, our communities de-risked, so that when disaster occurs, there is already money set aside so that you do not disrupt livelihood. In fact, we can have a boom.
Much. And we're going to get on to the topic of de-risking shortly. Dr. Olombi.
I thought you were going to advise me to stick to the one sentence.
One sentence, please, if possible.
But it's a very, very difficult one to stick to one sentence. Let's take just a little time more on that, because it is really essential to what we do as African multilateral financial institutions. and also essential to what we should be doing as a continent. I don't know how that question came to you, but it is really at the core of what we should be doing. And my brother here, Chernour of Shelter Afrique, then referred us to growth at 3 to 7%, what it is supposed to be. And you have to see, how do we achieve that growth? Because unless we achieve that growth, we will not transform the continent. You also heard in the Professor Boubacar Ndiaye, whom you so gladly presented to us. He referred to creating a Afrexim Bank not just for the financial performance. And he said that wasn't the essential thing. The essential thing was to take African trade to the fore. Now, how do you take African trade to the fore unless you have something to trade? You have to get there. And so to do that trading, you have to produce that which you trade, that which you're going to trade. Even the intra-African trade itself, which we say we should address first, you must produce that which Africans have to trade amongst themselves. But the critical thing about producing what you trade is that it also helps you to process. Since you're going to have to produce something, it's not just the commodities. You have to process. You have to take Guinean bauxite, where my brother Chernour comes from, to somewhere in Kenya or in Southern Africa. So you have to process that. And you will have to take latex, rubber, to use the simple English word for it. You'll have to take rubber from West Africa, from Cote d'Ivoire or from Cameroon, and perhaps to Egypt. But you are not going to take it raw, you have to process it. When you process it, you add value. When you add value, as they say, you create wealth creation. The answer I was going to give you in one sentence was, what are we going to do? Create wealth. That's where I was heading to. But how do we create the wealth? I feared you were going to do that follow-up question because it's your business to make life difficult for us. So I started with that. You create that wealth by processing. We have to process our bauxite. We have to process our iron ore. We have to process our timber. We have to process our petroleum products. And that's the business in which Afrexim Bank is now. It is sometimes described in many different words. Industrialization. We're now scared of that word because we've been on it for about 40 years and it hasn't moved. But that processing has to take place because that's what will create wealth, that's what will create jobs, that's what will create a wider tax base for our countries to tax. That's what would create that growth that Chernour was referring to at 7% annually, which seems low. We should perhaps be at 10 or 12%. The African Union said 7% annually for 50 years or so. So we've already gone past that period. We do not have 50 years again to 63. We probably have 40. So we should be somewhere at around 10%. But you can only do that if you begin to process your manganese in Gabon and your bauxite in Cameroon or Guinea and so on. I think creation of wealth is where we should be right now.
Creation of wealth. I'm going to come to you, Mrs. Ngoyi. Thank you for joining us on the stage. I've asked everyone in just one sentence what the main priorities for African MFI should be to achieve Agenda 2063.
Yes, good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for being here this morning. I think Dr. Elombi almost described everything that is necessary. I think that was a demonstration. It's about prosperity. It's about economical development. It's about social empowerment. And I think that what was described was to say We have to take our destiny in our own hands. We have to look at the markets that we have here within Africa. We have to consider it a market. We have to produce what we consume, so we cannot just be consumers in the world. That's not an economic model that's viable. You have to be a producer. Why do you have to be a producer? Because that's how you have jobs. We oftentimes talk about the demographic dividends that Africa has. 1.2 billion people, very soon. Half of the continent very young, but you have to give these people jobs. They cannot just be consumers for what's being produced around the world. They need to have jobs. We need to be able to produce what we consume. We need to be able to see beyond our national boundaries and realize that there's an opportunity across the board. We have to stop being dependent on hard currency from other countries. We need to be able to sell something from Kinshasa to Lagos without having to go through the dollar of the euro. That's the importance of PAPS and the digital infrastructure that we are putting together. We have to build infrastructure to unlock the trade barriers, which I said that yesterday. That was set up by the colons. We need to understand that and rethink about it boldly to say now that we want to trade with each other, we have to reinvent all of these routes, the trading routes. We have to put the infrastructure. We have to invest in energy. Without energy, in the cycle where we are, you can't do anything. You have to have competitive energy. So it's all of those things put together that will lead to economic prosperity, and then we can also tackle the social, which is also very important in everything that we do. In everything that we do, we want economic development viable, but the idea is to make African proud, to make them respected, to be able to promote education and other things. So I think that what was described by Dr. Elombi, if put into place, affects every single facet of our lives, and we have to work relentlessly to do that. We have to do it boldly. We understand that there's capital needed for it. That's why we do believe in prosperity, in doing things viably, in mobilizing our own capital, but also attracting the capital from the rest of the world, not out of pity, because we are the last frontier, because the opportunities are ours. And so I think that if we put all of that together, working together, as we do very well, boldly, without any complex, we will reach this agenda, and I hope sooner than 2063.
Thank you very much for that. Now, Dr. Elombi, I'm actually going to come back to you again. You spoke about that wealth creation that needs to be made, but we also need that collaboration as well. What practical steps do you see African MFIs need to take to deepen their collaboration with each other, reduce duplication, and improve coordination in delivering on continental priorities?
There are some simple steps we should take, but first you have to see the dimension is extremely vast. These institutions need to be capitalized, and the capitalization is low, even when compared to that of foreign institutions, financial institutions operating in our own continent. You know that the combined exposure of two Chinese financial institutions, China Exim Bank and China Development Bank, in the African continent is more than the combined loans and interventions of all our institutions sitting here, of the African Development Bank, of Marlene and myself are inside one group institution, of Exim Bank, of Shelter Afrique, of our insurance colleagues, and all of us of Africa Financial Institution, Africa Finance Institution in Lagos, of the PTA Bank, the Trade and Development Bank. You put all our capitalization together, or even our intervention in Africa, is less than what the Chinese are doing here. So we need to have that capital. But in the absence of that capital, which doesn't come with ease, what else do we have to do? We have to start to operate.
Well, of course, last year as well, there was the launch of the Alliance of African Multilateral Financial Institutions, which, yes, of course, FEDER is a part of, and I think Shelter Afrique as well. So that, of course, is helping that collaboration.
Yes, That's the direction I was going to. It is that we have to bring our different intervention instruments together and begin to work as one so that we can overwhelm the projects. We can't operate again in isolation. We just talked about creating wealth. To put it simply, becoming richer. You just make money and become rich. But if you're going to make money in the bauxite I was referring to, in Guinea, where there are huge deposits, or in Cameroon, where there are also massive deposits, you have to deal with the road infrastructure that goes with it, and the railway infrastructure, the power production units that you need. Bauxite is a massive consumer of energy. And you also have to do these port facilities to take that bauxite out, the processed bauxite out. So for all of that, not one institution can do it. We have to put the capital together, and that's what led us to creating the Alliance of African Financial Institutions. We can no longer work in isolation, and we cannot, as a result, also begin to see development in terms exclusively of insurance for my colleague here, or trade finance for Afrexim Bank. We have to begin to see it as development work, and then we put the approaches together. So if we needed $2 billion to do the bauxite in Guinea and in Cameroon, I wouldn't want him to hear him say, I only do insurance. We've gone beyond that. It's no longer about insurance. It's about development, creating the wealth. And for that reason, we have to find scope for him to intervene, apparently as an insurance provider, but ultimately supporting an export project, an important export project, which, as I know, in the case of Guinea, if we dealt just with bauxite, almost everything would change in Guinea overnight, let alone the other minerals they have there.
Thank you very much for that. Now, I'm going to turn to you next, Mr. Fall, to get the AFDB's perspective. The AFDB is a strong supporter of this new alliance of the banks. How can the AFDB, though, position itself to help MFIs focus resources on projects with the biggest impact for Agenda 2063?
Yes, actually, you said it. AFDB is a strong supporter of the African, or the Association of African Multilateral Financial Institutions, but we intend to be beyond a strong supporter and join the association. So this is a work in progress. But what I would like to also state is that you heard it from Dr. Elombi. If you look at those MFIs, most of them are undercapitalized, right? And they need those resources in terms of tier one capital, actually, to be able to stretch that financing and invest it into instruments, actually, that will have the highest impact. And AFDB has been doing that. You've heard it from Babacar Njai. AFDB has been the founding father of Afrexim. We are also a founding father of Shelter Africa, of ZEPRE here, African Financial Corporation, EADB, TDB, all of them, actually, AFDB is there. And collectively, for the past 10 years, actually, we have provided more than $3 billion to all those MFIs, combining our full range of financing instruments, you know, from trade finance, line of credit, you know, equity, and we have now moved beyond that concept of supporting them with green shares, actually, and I think we've done it with AFC. Where we come up with additional equity that will be directed actually to climate resilient and climate smart projects. So really, we will continue to do that. And also we will call for the MFIs actually to join on some of the initiatives we've done. It's one thing actually to call for capital, right? But it's one thing also to see what you have at hand and see how you can be innovative and stretch it and do more. We have been pioneering what we call the synthetic securitization platform. Currently, we're doing it with DBSA. And the idea is simple. It's how we can use our respective portfolio together, bring it to the private insurers that are here, the ZEP-Ray, the Africa Ray, in order to allow us to create headroom and do more projects, right? So really, without calling for additional debt, without calling for additional taxpayers' money, but being more efficient with what we have right now. I think this is key, and we call for all the MFIs to join us in those type of initiatives. We also want them to join us on other global initiatives that we are pursuing. I'm pretty sure you have all heard about the rechanneling of the special drawing rights with the IMF, actually, that AFDB is pioneering. The arrangement and the system is very simple. We want to use all that money that is at the IMF to allow us to raise capital in the form of hybrid capital and on-lending instrument. It has a strong multiplying effect. A $5 billion SDR from the IMF channeled through the AFDB can help us raise more than $25 billion. So really, it is a transformative play that has minimal impact on the fiscal ratios of our countries, and also that does require, the SDR donors to avail additional financing. And this is something also that we are calling MFIs to join us so that we can together, leverage those resources in order to do more projects. So that's the direction of travel for AFDB. We see all those MFIs are essential, really, for the SDG first. Don't forget, before you talk about 2063, we have the SDG that are just around the corner. We are very late on the SDGs. And we believe that collectively, with our complementary mandate, if we pull our efforts together, if we join our resources together, we can do it. Yeah, I'll stop there.
Thank you very much for those insights, Mr. Fall. Ms. Ngoy, I'm going to turn to you. FEDA is now in 21 member states. Is that correct? FEDA is now in 21 member states of Africa.
22.
And 22? Okay. And you're currently investing in a number of industries, from manufacturing to the creative economies. How do you make sure that you don't duplicate projects that other MFIs are doing?
No, thank you very much. So just so that everybody follows, so FEDA is the investment arm of Afreximbank. The idea was to say, if we are to achieve the goals that we have, everything cannot be financed with just debt. So while Dr. Elombi was talking about the importance of syndication, the importance of working together so that everybody plays a part, we realize that when it comes to financing, bold financing, transformational financing, sometimes you need to take the risk of an owner. So that's why FEDA was created, to say we're going to be financing the bold projects with some level of equity. That's what, when we talk about blended finance, that's what we're talking about. Everybody needs to be able to come at their level, equity level, senior debt level, concessional financing, some government support, and that's how you're able to finance bold projects. So just to give you a premise, that's on that basis that FEDA was created in 2019. We started with essentially 2 countries establishing it, and we're very happy to see that in a few number of years we now have 22 member countries, from the northern parts of Africa to east to central to west, and I encourage more of our members countries to join. Our mission at FEDA is to do 3 things: industrialize Africa, making sure that when we export to the rest of the world, we do it with value add. I think that Dr. Elombi insisted on we need to transform our timber, we need to transform our bauxite. That's very much at the heart of our mission. And then thirdly is to trade with each other, which is to say there's a lot of opportunities that we have. Let's trade with each other. So our objective has been to do very bold things, things that are catalysts for changes. And so one of the key criteria when my team is looking at investment is to say there may be a good commercial opportunity, but if we don't see the transformational impact, that's not for us, that's for somebody else to do. So I will give you a few examples of the deals that we've done. We are the largest shareholder today in Arise IIP, which is an industrial platform present in 12 countries that allows businesses to come and transform within the industrial platforms. So they're provided with water, electricity, infrastructure, and the logistical routes to be able to do transformation of timber in Gabon, of coton in Benin, etc. That's a massive investment that is so large and so prosperous today, that is actually attracting other forms of capital on the continent, as well as international capital as well, which is very important. We are investors into the refinery that was just inaugurated in Angola over the past few days. The idea again was to say, let's transform our crude oil. Let's make sure that we don't export crude oil and then re-import refined products. We can do it on the ground with the right investments. Afrexim came in as a senior lender, AFC as well, so that's to give you an idea of the syndication that we're talking about. And then FEDA at the equity level being there to de-risk the project as much as possible for the lenders. We invested into a smaller business in Mauritania that used to be a trading business that is now actually making eggs, chicken, and delivering 20% of the chicken needs in Mauritania, profitably, competitive vis-à-vis the importations. So those are the type of things that we'd like to do. Some of them are major platforms where we'd like to grow them. Others, like the Mauritania business, we hope that we're going to be copied all around the continent, understanding that with $40 million of capital, we are able to achieve protein sustainability and produce our own chicken. We don't have to import it at lower quality from Brazil and other places. No offense to Brazil, but those are the type of things that we like to do. So some of them will be critical platforms, but some of them will be case studies to say this works, it's sustainable. Let's replicate it with our platform, but we're happy for other people to do the same. So that's I give you a full view of how we think about those things.
Thank you very much. So it's about creating that infrastructure here so that whole value chain can be done end to end instead of going outside. Thank you for that. So we've heard a bit about the coordination and the priorities that are needed, but one of the things is risk when things go wrong. For example, with the COVID-19 pandemic and the impact that it had across the globe. Mr. Kamanga, insurance is often invisible until things go wrong. Yet it's critical for investor confidence. What innovative risk tools is ZEPRI using to unlock larger private and cross-border capital flows into Africa?
Okay, good morning again. So insurance penetration in Africa is very low. And what we mean by insurance penetration is the percentage of premium compared to the GDP. Put differently, we say that the protection gap in Africa is very, very high, in excess of 90. Except maybe South Africa, a few others where it is in excess of less than that. So ZEPRI was formed in 1990. We have been in business for a long time. So somewhere along the journey, we reflected on ourselves and said, we were formed to develop insurance and reinsurance in the region, yet the penetration was too low. And we asked ourselves why. And the major reason we saw was the structure of our economies. Majority of our people are in agriculture, and agriculture in Africa is smallholder farmers. Secondly, a significant portion of our people are in what you call MSME, that little retailer. Those two sectors do not render themselves accessible to the traditional insurance. So somewhere along the journey, we also realized governments, they only take cover for these big projects which we are discussing when the project is under construction. So the contractor will buy cover, or the insurer or the financier insists that you need to have cover during construction. As soon as that project is commissioned, there is no cover. It's what is called self-insurance, meaning that if the bridge collapses, government will borrow or will look for taxes from somewhere. Now, the theory of that was logical some time back, but with the increasing difficulties, physical space becoming smaller, most governments cannot respond to disasters. which means you possibly have a critical breach, very critical, collapses, and the government has to go and look for money, borrow or beg. So looking through those, then CEPRI realized we needed to find a way to enable governments to set aside money. We needed to money for critical infrastructure and money for vulnerable communities. We needed to find a way to make sure that SMEs, which basically are involved in trade, are protected. And we needed to de-risk agriculture. So what CEPRI has spent some time now is investing in technology to be able to give parametric insurance cover, to be able to protect the vulnerable communities in agriculture space and in SME. For example, if there is drought, you want to be able to protect them. If there are floods, you need to be able to protect them. If a bridge like that, we need to be able to make sure that the government is able to be enabled to buy cover for its critical assets, so that when there is a disaster, you don't have to reallocate the budgets to finance those critical infrastructures. I just want to give two examples. First is we have been able to collaborate with World Bank and the insurance industry in the Horn of Africa to be able to de-risk the pastoral economies, a project funded to the tune of $360 million, and with private sector play bringing on board something like $600 million to be able to de-risk a group which is the most vulnerable, very risky, but through that collaboration we're being able to do it. The second example I want to give, and through collaboration with Afrexim, thank you Afrexim, we were able to launch a Trans-Africa Bond Alliance, and the idea is to de-risk traders, whether you are a contractor, whether you are moving goods from point A to B, using guarantee arrangements. And we believe through those many interventions, we would be able to be moving towards de-risking our people, our businesses, and at the end, close the protection gap.
Thank you very much. Now, Dr. Kabata, Badia has backed Shelter Afri, and it's also backed some trade funds. How can blended and local currency finance be scaled so Africa raises capital without adding to debt risks? Dr. Kabata.
Thank you very much. I hope I'm audible enough. So indeed, Badia has used quite a different approach when it comes to development financing over the last 5-6 years, I would say. So we use a debt to equity approach to help some of the DFIs to recapitalize themselves. And Shelter Afrique is one of those institutions. So the approach consisted of extending concessional loans to member states who are shareholders of those development financial institutions. So by doing that, member states have keep participating in the capital increase of those institutions. Development financial institution, as I said, Shelter Afrique is one of those. But as a matter of fact, even some of the guarantee institutions, insurance-oriented institutions, have also faced capital issues. So in that extent, we've worked with FSA, Fonds de Solidarité Africain. We've been discussing with ATIDI. We've been discussing with FAGAS, so that by also recapitalizing those insurance and guarantee development financial institutions, we can de-risk trade and investment around the continent, and bringing in more private capital And by doing that, some of the government will not recourse to direct loans, because by de-risking, the private capital actually can be crowded in and allow the government to achieve the same development goals without themselves getting into contracting new loans. So I think this is one of the approaches that Badea has used. As you may realize, these times around, FX has become one of the key issues when government are contracting loans in a hard currency, and they need to actually use the same money within their country, but when it comes to reimbursement, they need to buy hard currency. So some of the countries have been raising money in the local market, and by strengthening insurance and guarantee fund to cover that foreign exchange risk, that can also help the government to raise money within the local market without necessarily contracting loans in hard currency from other institutions. So these are the things that are feasible, and we guys at Badea have used that approach, but it's scalable, which means we've done that with a couple of institutions so far. We are under discussion with others, but if we join force among ourselves, financial institutions from the continent, with the collaboration in as far as we are concerned, Badea, in collaboration with some of our sister institutions from the Arab Coordination Group, we can scale up that initiative and help our government to afford more financial development finance, at the same time de-risking investment and trade around the continent.
Thank you very much. Now, across the continent, there is a housing deficit. I believe there's 52 million units that are needed. Mr. Han, you've set an ambitious target of building 200,000 homes by 2030. What financing strategy do you see as the real game changer that could turn Africa's housing deficit into one of the continent's biggest growth opportunities?
Well, thank you very much for the question. Just to say that, when we talk about numbers, you have to look at it not only from a direct enabling perspective, but also the leverage that we also create by bringing other DFIs and other institutions. So the numbers are much bigger than what you just mentioned. I want to start by saying, first of all, that African cities are engines for sustainable growth on the continent. So the way most cities and countries got built was through major investments in cities development. So the urban future determines the way the countries will develop. So the alliance that we put in place, this is the Alliance of African Multilateral Financial Institutions, is part of the solution. Because we do realize that as only one institution, we cannot address that gap alone. You mentioned 53 million housing deficit. That's on the conservative side. If you look at some of the reports from my ex-employer, the World Bank Group, we're talking about 95 million housing deficit in Africa, depending on how you look at it. But let's assume 53 million housing deficit. Now, if at the bare minimum, the home price is, let's say, $25,000, if you're talking about affordable, low-income housing, so 53 million housing deficit will equate to more than $1 trillion. And my great brother, Dr. Elombi, was just referring to basically the size of our balance sheets as African multilaterals, which is far, far away from the size in China and other places in the world. And given this only one sector, one deficit of more than $1 trillion needed, that basically goes way beyond the total capacity that all of our institutions, including our big brother, African Development Bank, So it's just to tell you the financing gap is massive, is huge. I'm only talking about one sector, $1 trillion. So imagine all other sectors, infrastructure and others. So the solutions that we've been working on is not only among ourselves as African multilaterals, but also internationally. But as African multilateral, I want to give you a couple of examples of solutions that we've been working on, specifically within AMFI, the Alliance, and Afrexim Bank. There's a particular product that we have worked on for many years now. Again, we are two sister institutions. By the way, when President Babacar Ndiaye hologram was displayed and speaking, you can basically add to everything he's saying, Afrexim Bank and Shelter Afrique. Because Shelter Afrique was created in 1982, and Afrexim maybe 10 years later. But the same vision drove the creation of those institutions. So the collaboration is just natural. So one product we came up with is called Contour. Contour is basically a way to collaborate where Shelter Afrique, with its expertise of project finance, developer finance, can take the developer finance risk while the project is being built, okay? Now, Afrexim Bank is more on the receiver end. So they will refinance that project after the project has been delivered and get repaid on the cash flows generated from the operations of the project. As an example, you take the hotel industry. The hotel construction program or rent-to-own program for housing can be financed by Shelter Afrique in large scale. And once the homes are delivered, based on our expertise in making sure that the projects are delivered, then Afrexim Bank pick it up and refinance the project longer term and get repaid on the rental payment from the houses or from the hotel, basically payments, right? So the hotel stays. So that's one particular product. Another thing that we've been working on is this AMC, Asset Management Company. So the Asset Management Company, as part of AMFI, as I said, we have 10 institutions that are members of the Alliance of African Multilaterals, is to put our resources together to mobilize long-term concessional funding and commercial funding and issuing even capital markets instruments to scale up the size of our interventions across market. So that AMC is also being developed by our secretariat at the moment of all our institutions. And we are also putting in place a platform, an investment platform, where all of you investors that have specific projects, you can actually submit your projects on this AMFI platform. It's going to be online, and we will be basically among our institutions looking at this platform on a daily basis and say, okay, this is a project that Shelter Afrique can finance, or this is a project that Afrexim Bank can finance, and even our partners, Badia, which is the Arab, part of the Arab Coordination Group, can also look into these projects and even finance them. And of course, with the muscle of the African Development Bank, also we're looking for that partnership to be part of this initiative. And then finally, project preparation, because we realize in Africa, the issue is having bankable projects. It's a major, major issue. So we as DFIs, we need to get involved upstream, preparing projects. And that's exactly what we're going to sign, I think, end of day today. Dr. Elombi, if I'm not mistaken. This is a JPPF. So it's a Joint Project Preparation Fund that we are putting in place as part of the AMFI, the Alliance of Multilateral Financial Institutions, to basically prepare projects. So feasibility studies, research, making sure that we can structure the projects the right way and bring them to markets where we can co-finance from our own balance sheet or leverage funding from international markets. And then maybe finally, you talked about local currency, the issue about local currency. You know, for our particular sector, housing is a local currency play. People earn in local currency. They have to pay back their mortgages in local currency, right? So we have to make sure that our clients, the developers or the banks that we are financing, don't have to take over the FX risk on these projects. So that's why we issue local currency bonds in many markets, and we've done it in Nigeria, 45 billion naira out of a 200 billion naira program. We've done it in the West African Monetary Union with BRVM, where we are about to go back to the market. We issued 7 times already in that particular CFA market, and we've done it in Kenya, in shilling, the local currency. So we have to know that we have enough funding. We have a lot of funding on the continent. We just have to know how to mobilize this funding. Pension funds, insurance companies are sitting on massive amount of local currency that we can tap into. And this is what we're about to also support the Kenyan government, where they put in place this housing fund. And the idea is to scale up that housing fund. That housing fund is generating anywhere between $50 and $70 million every month. So on a yearly basis, it could be almost $1 billion. But the housing deficit in Kenya is so large that we need to help them scale up and leverage that $1 billion a year into something like $30 billion to address the housing deficit. And we'll do it through capital markets, pension funds, and something that we did also with the student housing sector, because student housing is a major opportunity on the continent, and that's how we've been able to put in place one of the largest student housing developer called Acorn in Kenya. And this institution recently, last year, raised about $200 million, $250 million actually from DFC in the US. And this is through also pension funds that came through that particular financing. And we, Shelter Afrique, have been the anchor investor in some of those initiatives. So just to say that, yes, we need local collaboration, regional collaboration, but also international and global markets. And this is exactly what we are doing as Alliance of African Multilaterals.
Thank you very much. So the global capital is there, but unfortunately right now Africa is only getting a small fraction of that. Dr. Olombi, I'm going to turn to you. Which innovative financing instruments have proven most effective in mobilizing large-scale investments for Africa's development? And how can African MFIs expand their use? This for Dr. Olombi.
There?
Dr. Olombi, the question.
Okay,
2 doctors on stage.
Yes, thank you. Most of those items have been referred to by Cheno already from Shelter Afrique. Innovation is not something you sit like Einstein and then you say, this is my Einstein moment, Eureka, or like Isaac Newton, and the apple drops and then you get it is something that you get with experience. It comes gradually, you build it as you move the frontiers. So in Afrexim Bank, innovation has now come to us naturally. And it has come because we face the difficulties boldly. We see where they are, and then we go there. In the process, of course, you see where the problems are. When you see where the problems are, they are usually not magical solutions. They are just bolts and nuts and bolts. You see where you need to tighten a little, where you need to loosen a little, where you need to attract more. And that's the business in which we have. And some of the innovations we've done are in the domestic capital mobilization you were referring to. It was for a long time believed that African Central Bank reserves are not intended for use in Africa. They're just to pay for imports, buy rice and import whatever needs to be imported from abroad and kept there. Now, over the last 5 years, we then demonstrated in Afrexim Bank that all of that could be captured to reduce our cost of funding, and we are now using that money to re-lend back to African states. So you may want to call that innovation, but it's really just a little tweak in the way you behave. And that takes plenty of time because you have to persuade the central bank boards of directors and owners that even though you are not AAA rated, you're still good for their money. And for us, because we were lending to the states, it wasn't a very difficult argument to make. It was a simple argument, they understood, but they needed the time to go through their processes. And the argument was that the same central banks and the governments come to us and they need $500 million. So we put the $500 million on the table, and then they say to us, to disburse the money, transfer it to Federal Reserve New York, Deutsche Bank here and there. Then we say to them, hold on, we are good to give you $500 million, but we are not good to keep part of it. Is that right? Then they begin to realize that there is something wrong. Even if they themselves as individuals can do nothing about it, but there is something wrong in the scheme. You take other Africans' money, $500 million is given to you, and the first place you deposit it is with a foreign institution. So the other Africans who gave it to you must have been foolish. So that mindset tweak became what you may call innovation, in the sense that the central bank began to change their internal processes so that they could also put this deposit with the Afrexim Bank at a cheap rate, and we now use the money to relend to African entities at a slightly cheaper rate than we would do if we had raised that money from abroad. The social insurance institutions are also they're really very rich, but in domestic currencies. And we found out that several projects we do, in some, up to 50% of what is required is in local currency, just to pay for domestic supplies. Some is just 20 or 30%. But the way to go around that is to ask the local social insurance funds to fund that bit of it. And when they fund that part of it, then we take the foreign exchange component. It reduces the cost. You're mobilizing capital. And sometimes, as an innovation, we use that local currency to increase our capital. It works simple. It's just based on experience. The Social Insurance Fund looks at the way we operate, and it says it's going to be getting a dividend and other business from Afrexim Bank of this high, which is significant. But it needs to pay for the capital of Afrexim Bank to get that dividend. That payment is in foreign currency. It's in dollars or in euros. But we have a project in that country which in local currency terms requires the equivalent of about $20 million in local currency. So we asked the Social Insurance Fund to provide the local currency equivalent of $20 million to fund the project locally, and we credit them for $20 million in our capital. So we get a capital increase. They are now holding a foreign currency instrument. In a sense, we've helped them to get foreign currency without their having to spend for it. At the same time, they have bolstered Afrexim Bank's capital position by $20 million. Otherwise, Afrexim Bank would have had to take the $20 million, go locally, exchange it into local currency for the local expenditure, which the local social insurance fund has taken up. In other forms of innovations, this my brothers on the insurance side know it. We just found out as a financing bank that we do many projects. Most projects require insurance cover. The financiers and the investors themselves ask for insurance. Premium is paid, which is what he referred to. And when we looked into it, we found out that 96% of the premium was being paid abroad to foreign insurance entities. So we told this gentleman on the insurance side, African Trade Insurance, Africa Re, Africa, ZEPRI for Eastern and Southern Africa, We then sat down with them and said, we're going to push the businesses to you now. You have to get ready for it. And don't tell us you do not have the capacity, but we'll push the business to you now. We'll get the premiums to you. You collect the premium. That's domestic capital mobilization. Then you issue the instrument. You can go for reinsurance abroad if you want, but that reinsurance means you only take a proportion of that premium out, and you keep a significant proportion. And when they were a bit slow, in Afrexim Bank, we created the insurance entity itself. And when it started collecting the money, they saw the juice, and then they came. So we then pulled our efforts together, our resources together, and we are stronger for it. So it's just a tweak. Innovation, few people in the world get that Einstein moment, but you always get your normal, day-to-day, grandmother common sense creation, just the way grandma operates. She's doing cassava, she sees this difficulty, she pushes the end a little, and she's moving to doing gari to sell, and then she moves to gari to some other thing. Inch by inch, you capture those areas which you think you want to do. And some of that is also based on the strategic ways that you do the investment. So we just decided recently, instead of financing the export of those commodities, we do cotton processing in Guinea. In Benin. In the process, this is the value, additional value that you produce. In our calculation in Guinea, it was 1,000% more than processing the cotton fiber to the textiles, the actual wares. The entities we finance Arise in Benin with the African Finance Corporation is now selling to Nike and selling to the big names that all the young Gen Zs here are familiar with. So the value has gone up by 1,000 times. That incremental value, because you've changed the strategic way in which you invest, that additional value is capital for you. You take it for you, for the government, for the employees, for the system as a whole, even just for the fact that the employees are there and working, earning a good living, having fun, they can go on holidays. The feel-good factor alone, they just feel good. That feel-good itself is a source of wealth because they can then do the work better and generate more. So the innovation comes in very many different ways. As you were speaking, I was trying to make some notes of all of those we've done. I have notes here for about 12 different ways we have done that, even in the reallocation of resources. But I think you're soon going to ask me to stop, so I'd rather give it back to you. But if you're ready, we can go on.
Thank you very much to Dr. Olombi.
Yeah.
On that note, I'm going to bring it to a close.